This is Sarnia Lambton Daily for Thursday, June 4th. Good evening, I'm Terry Doyle. The federal government has announced another special payment for seniors dealing with the effects of the pandemic. Those eligible for old age security will receive a tax-free $300 extra payment during the week of July 6th. Those eligible to get the guaranteed income supplement will receive an extra $200 on top of that. This is a similar payment the government made to seniors earlier in the pandemic. The announcement of this was made by the Prime Minister today. On the local front, the Sarnia Lambton Chamber of Commerce has a new leader. Alan Calvert is the new CEO of the Sarnia Chamber. He will take over for Shirley De Silva, who left the chamber back in March. Calvert lives in Brights Grove and has been in the automotive industry for many years. He'll be officially introduced at a chamber media briefing on Monday. Almost 300 COVID-19 test results came in the past 24 hours, with none of them coming back positive. The overall number of positive tests in Sarnia Lambton remains at 266, with 24 deaths and 211 people recovered. That leaves 31 active cases in the region, a number that has been consistently going down over the past couple of weeks. More than 7,300 tests have been administered locally since the pandemic began, roughly 96% of those coming back negative. Well, as we know, throughout the pandemic, it's certainly been interesting times, challenging times, but I think a lot of success stories as well. When it comes to the education field, here is Ben Hazzard, Superintendent of Education for the Lambton Kent District School Board. Joining me now, and Ben, did I pretty much summarize how the last 3 months have gone when it comes to the education sector?
You absolutely have summarized that well. Lots of challenges, lots of success stories, and the kind of the ending still to be written as we keep working together. Trying to figure out how do we keep supporting folks in this changing landscape locally.
Of course, we found out that schools were going to remain closed throughout June to finish off this school year. Did that at least give everyone a little bit of a, almost a finite situation? It's like, okay, we know where we stand, we know what we need to do to finish this school year off.
Absolutely. What it helped us do is for certain really key things in school year life, we were kind of planning two different ways all the time. So let our staff, our teachers and educators, EEs and EAs and our principals really start planning on what does that look like in a virtual or remote learning environment. So a few things really important that started to come up is, so how do we celebrate graduations? How do we do those year-end type celebrations that occur at a grade 12 level or a grade 8 level? How do we welcome new students into kindergarten? So we've been able to start planning and putting that into place for our teachers, put that into place for our communities, and really great work being done for teachers to really help students to commemorate the end of this school year. But it also let us think a little more deeply about what does it look like for teaching and learning, Terry. I can't say enough gratitude for the ways that families have adapted and adjusted, the ways our educators have risen to the challenge to show kindness and compassion and keep that learning going. So we really moved, when that closure happened, from a learning stance into kind of phase 3. And the phase 3 is, okay, we've been trying different things, and now we needed to kind of reach out and hear what parents were thinking, what families were feeling, and how can we match what family preferences were with the educators. And it really was interesting. So we had teachers ask parents, so what is the best option for it? Is it live teacher support with some on-demand learning, or is it on-demand learning, or at this time are you busy with other things? So we saw huge amounts of response and ability for us to ensure that we're providing, in some cases, more on-demand learning because families had different schedules. And for others, it was like we need a little bit more teacher support. So it really allowed us to fine tune going into this phase 3 or this June time period to make sure that we ensure that that learning continues right to the end of the school year, Terry.
How critical is it as well, and maybe critical isn't the right word, but certainly imperative to make sure that indeed sort of the book gets closed. If you're a grade 3 student, make sure that all those check marks are hit and those milestones are hit, just to be able to finish that off so that there isn't anything lingering, we'll say, going into grade 4, moving on to advancement to set up the youngsters for success that way.
Absolutely. What are the key concepts that need to be learned in things like math, but also reflecting on what have I learned in my grade 3 year? What have I learned in my grade 10 course? What have I learned that I want to take forward with me? So those are really key things to those reflection type activities, but also feeling that sense of accomplishment, another year of learning, and what are the key items that way. That's also kind of dovetailed to the next thing, Terry. And the next thing is that the families have now been able to sign up to go get their belongings, to get that kind of feeling of closure as well. It's also the virtual learning and the reflection, but it's also getting the physical things that we need from our classrooms. That pair of sneakers that we left in our locker, those binders, those items that we had in our desks. So it's allowing. So we have a system set up where every school has a online schedule where families can sign up for a 15-minute slot to go in and make sure they get their things. It's also great then as well for physically getting to the school, and that I think helps as well with some of the kind of closure and kind of that feeling of, all right, so this year is wrapping up.
And I guess that's the thing for, someone like you and I, if we left behind, a book or, something, a pencil case, you name it, it's probably not that big to work around it. But I've got to think for someone, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, someone like that, where it was their Spider-Man pencil or something like that. That's probably something where it's a bigger deal, that just being able to get those things back to them probably, means
Yes.
something, just to put an extra little, feeling of, okay, it's theirs.
It's absolutely essential. These things have significant value. They have emotional impact. It's something that the child has just used, and it's been helpful for some of that normalcy. So it's really important that we get those, like you said, those pencil cases, getting the, that pencil, that materials, those pictures that may have been in a locker, all those different items. Maybe a backpack was left. Whatever it is that the students' belongings really matter to them. It's important that we honor the students with that. Also, really at this time, allowing teachers to provide some access to the school too, so that they're able to organize some things as well. Because very similarly to our students, our teachers have lots of items there as well that they can use to help reflect on the school year and ensure that students are seeing just kind of the closure as we get near the end of this school year coming now into June. But the learning's continuing. We're continuing with our process, continuing with those key concepts, but still providing access. And in this changing landscape, we're just really happy that families are able to access to get those things that matter for students.
How do things work when it comes to, I'll call it progress reports? Report cards is of course a common term as well, but how in terms of that tracked progress and obviously so that documented progress moving forward, how does that work?
So all students are going to receive a report card. Teachers right now are working on top of all the other things that they've been learning, and it's been significant. They are now writing the report cards for students right through our whole system. And what's happening is we have evidence from when students were face-to-face up until March 13th. We also have evidence that's occurred throughout the whole school closure period where we were learning from home. So teachers are taking the evidence that they had when they were face-to-face. They're kind of formulating a baseline of marks. But then if students have improved over that time at home and there's been really positive comments about that, then that can be incorporated as well. So that we'll hear and be able to provide to families that progress and explain how that's the learning has happened throughout the school year and how it has been in term 2. So it's going to be a little different though, Terry, because normally we have all that information in face-to-face learning all the way from the beginning of February all through to the end of June. And this time now it's going to be a little more limited. So teachers are doing a great job using their professional judgment and trying to figure out the right evidence to use and making those determinations and those evaluations for students to help families understand how the students' learning went throughout the course of this term.
We know, especially with the warmer weather and into the May, June part of the school year, there are those extracurricular events, cross country, track and field, those type of things, where in some school sports that I have to think that's a challenge right now, where of course they're all canceled, and where the students, maybe that was their the carrot sometimes, or those things they look forward to because they saw the older kids got to do that, and then this grade was going to be their turn. And I've got to think that can't be easy, and maybe just trying to support the students, knowing that it's unfortunate, but we're just trying to work through this all together.
It is difficult. Those different events that occur from talent shows to athletic events, to art activities. Those all really make up the fabric of a school year. All those extracurricular time that teachers spend in those areas to really make learning come to life, how community members come forward with that, often contributing to track and field days or play days. It really is a community event in a school. There's been really some neat things happening though, Terry. Some of our local schools in Sarnia have done things like virtual talent shows. So they've had a tradition of having talent shows. So they're translating that into a virtual environment. So we're trying to take some of those disappointment pieces and also just kind of repurpose them in a different way to kind of show some of the really great things that can occur. We even have schools who are doing things like remote and video announcements that can be shared remotely, so that we're able to really showcase and feel together in this time and showcase the learning that's happening. There's been a lot of impressive things happening at this time, and a lot of folks rising to the challenge, students rising to the challenge, engaging in the learning. We have teachers and principals and community members coming on board and providing support, check-ins, making sure people are doing well with their well-being. So it's really an opportunity to, I think, encapsulate that at this time, even though there's some disappointment around some of those things that haven't happened in a physical way.
And I'm sure that would include those rite of passage events, grade 8 graduation, high school graduation, prom. Some of those I would think in some cases people are probably seeing if they can even get a rain check for those, probably prom or, getting dressed up, and the pictures for prom might have to wait a little while. Is it, sort of hearing where in some cases whenever possible, obviously you can't go too far, a grade 8 graduation isn't going to happen probably, next October, November when they're off to high school, but indeed when in doubt, either something virtual or even if something can be done a little bit later on. Is that sort of in the works?
Absolutely. So you've seen some ways to commemorate that with some of our secondary schools getting things like signs made up. We have some postponement of some of those things like grade 12 graduations and working through that with school communities. With grade 8, we know that sometimes those students go to grade 9 and there's different levels of want to come back to the elementary school. So we have commemoration activities happening at every of our elementary schools with some physical, tangible items. We also have a virtual piece to that. So that there's whether that be like a pre-recorded kind of video montage that gets shared at a certain time, if that's what works best for the community, or even in some cases there's some live grade 8 graduations happening in a virtual environment. So I think the key thing is, like we spoke before with belongings and getting to the end of the year and feeling that sense of closure, is when we get to those milestone moments, how do we help to commemorate the moment and ensure that students have something that will be memorable, that they're able to look back on and really celebrate what they have accomplished over the course of their academic careers.
Ben, as we wrap this up, this update, we do appreciate it. If you kind of look, if you were taking a 30,000-foot view of everything that's gone on over the past 3 months, what comes to mind, and if you're able to sort of float over everyone and how everyone's worked together here?
Remarkable and beyond what we thought was possible. So I think when we saw this, if we look at a very high level and we look at, and we could look down into homes and we could see children engage with a device that they borrowed from their local school, sitting around a kitchen table, a parent providing some support, another sibling providing some support, engaging in a Google Meet or a live chat with their classroom and with their teacher, who's helping them wade through something like a math concept, being many kilometers away from them. Just the fact of that is remarkable. Phone calls from teachers and EAs and ECEs checking in with students, caring about what happens next, caring about how the child's adapting to this new reality. I think we would all just say that's remarkable, and it goes back to, I think, the heart of our community and the heart of our families and the heart of our schools, in which that we want the best for our students and we want the best for their families and our whole community. So I think it's just been remarkable the way the education system has adapted and continued to provide opportunities for our students at this time, Terry.
No, Ben, certainly we've seen throughout this, no matter what level the community people are at, they've certainly been working together, and no different in the education sector, families, teachers, everyone coming together here. Ben, we appreciate the time. As always, stay well and enjoy your weekend.
And Terry, thank you for what you do. You are bringing so much great information to us from a local perspective. It helps me know each day what this means in Sarnia, Lambton. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. We appreciate it. Take care. There's Ben Hazzard joining us from the Lambton Kent District School Board. Stay tuned. You're watching Sarnia Lambton Daily on your TV. Welcome back to Sarnia Lambton Daily. Something a little lighter now, as we would normally be 2 months into the Major League Baseball season, but that is on hold and it's uncertain when baseball will return. Toronto Blue Jays analyst Joe Siddall lives in Windsor. He recently sat down with our Robert Scousland to talk a little baseball.
Well, fortunately, we're doing relatively well. And for me personally, it's a lot like the off season, Robert. I come home after the World Series and I get to be home in Windsor for a few months before we head back to Florida for spring training. So for me, staying home a lot and doing some yard work and tending around the house is kind of what my off season is like. So we've been very fortunate. My wife is still working as well. So things could be a lot worse, and I know it certainly is for a lot of people. So we're grateful for the position that we're in, despite what is going on all around us in the entire world, let alone our community.
Yeah. With Major League Baseball shut down, how has COVID-19 affected you and Sportsnet's coverage?
One thing we have done, and we weren't sure how this was going to go, we got sent home right around the middle of March when Major League Spring Trainings shut down. And when we came home, we were literally just told to kind of sit tight and we're going to see how this goes. Well, after a couple of weeks, the decision was made that Jamie Campbell and I are still doing our Blue Jays Central show, but we're doing it virtually online. And we've produced a show a week that is not going on to television just yet because there's nobody, I don't believe, in the Rogers studios in Toronto. So we're doing it online. They're posting it on sportsnet.ca. I think we've done 3 or 4 shows now, and the plan is to continue with that. And at least the last couple have gotten a little bit more interesting for us because we got to talk some baseball, because the baseball talks are increasing, not so much about the pandemic, but where baseball may go in these next couple of months, because the discussions are happening more and more, and they're getting a little bit more pertinent to baseball being played back on the field. And so fingers are crossed for all of us.
Yeah, I've noticed on Sportsnet's been filling their time now with past games and movies. You know how that's been received, and what game or what baseball movie would you like to see?
Well, it's funny you ask, because it has been received very well, and some of our producers in Toronto from our show saying that our little segments have been received well, but so have the classic games, and what they call them the Blue Jays Rewind games. So, you know, I grew up probably like you, Robert. I was going to say a Tiger fan, but I know you're a Yankee fan. A lot of people around here grew up as Tigers fans, so seeing some of the classic Blue Jays games hasn't been bad. I don't mind tuning in on occasion because I'm still getting acclimated with that. I tried to tell all my people at work in Toronto, I didn't grow up with this stuff like you all did. I was a Tiger fan, but they've been received very well. If there is a game, I did see something online just the other day about Maglio Ordonez's home run in the Division Series or the Championship Series to advance the Tigers to the World Series in '06. I was at that game, of course, working with the Tigers. I remember it vividly, and I certainly remember Dan Dickerson's call. I saw that online the other day, and I just got chills because I felt like I was right back at Comerica Park. I wouldn't mind seeing a game like that in its entirety. Not so much the World Series against the Cardinals because it didn't go so well, but those are the games for me that are closer to my heart because I was right there with the Tigers working with them at the time.
Any particular baseball movie you'd like to see?
You know, I've seen some on there. I was a big fan of The Natural, and the reason is I played in the minor leagues, a friend of mine by the name of Chris Pollock. Well, his dad was Bernie Pollock, the costume designer in Hollywood, and his uncle was Sidney Pollock, obviously produced a lot of movies. Well, we went out, my wife and I went out to visit him. He lived out in L.A. at the time. This is back still in our playing days, and he had the Wonder Boy bat that Robert Redford, of course, had, in his room. So he had it in his house. So I think of that, and I think back to that movie and that story of being able to be so closely related to that. I always have to share that story. I thought that was pretty cool.
Spring brings us a renewal, and kids are looking forward to starting the ball season. What do you advise young players to do during this pandemic?
Well, social media has been a wonderful thing, and I see all kinds of kids, whether they're doing their tee work or soft toss out in the driveway or hitting wiffle balls. whatever you can do, that's what you do, because you have to try to stay sharp. I remember even back in my playing days and when I was coming up in the minor leagues, spending my winters here in Windsor, I used to drape a blanket over a piece of wood or a cord in my garage and just fire balls into it to simulate that I was long tossing. So you're trying to continue to increase that workload just as though you were in Florida outside throwing and getting your arm in shape for spring training. Same you can do with hitting. And I said wiffle balls are a wonderful thing, but there's nothing like the real thing. And right now, that's the case for everyone. You just can't get together and do those things. Hopefully things improve in the near future, but you do everything you can. And I see a lot of kids getting creative, and it's a wonderful thing, whether it's flipping to each other in the garage or on the road, whatever they can. What I've seen for the most part, they're doing it safely. They're social distancing and keeping their distance. Hopefully they can get a little closer soon.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts for the graduating seniors or those travel players that are looking to take the next step in their future, in their baseball futures?
Oh, sympathy. It's too bad for these young kids. I was there myself as a kid. I had kids come up through high school and play sports at the post-secondary level, and it's an exciting time and choosing where you might go, what schools might be interested if you are going to play collegiately somewhere. And to have this happen at this particular time, I'm already hearing from some U.S. colleges in the States that are shutting down their baseball programs. And that's a really sad state. We certainly don't hope that that doesn't spread too far across the U.S. or even here in Canada. But we know baseball programs aren't the big revenue programs, especially in the U.S. So it's pretty sad to see that starting, because you just wonder, you see one or two or three and how that snowball is going to go down the hill. It's very unfortunate for these young people at a pretty important time in their lives, not only pursuing their post-secondary education, but hopefully, too, playing a sport that they love, and it might get delayed.
And that leads to, discussion with no fans in the stands. How would this affect the minor leagues who are really dependent on attendance, and players such as Jacob Robson with the Tigers?
Yeah, it is very unfortunate. And even before this pandemic, we had heard all offseason about Major League Baseball stepping in and perhaps cutting out a lot of the minor league franchises across the United States. And that's a sad thing alone, because we all know the small towns that have minor league baseball, and they're cherished dearly by the local people in their communities, and they really help the economies in those small towns. And you think of cutting the number of teams, and there are an awful lot of minor league affiliates and minor league players throughout organizations. Are there too many? Perhaps. But at the same time, the fewer people you have playing this game at the lower levels, less chance there is for those 13th round Albert Pujolses to come out. I mean, we know they're not all top 1 and 2 rounders that play in the major leagues. You do get a lot of those outliers from the later rounds. And I think of Jacob Robson, a local kid who is at that level right now on the cusp of getting to the big leagues, especially with the Detroit Tigers. And I know Jacob very well, and I'm sure he's preparing himself and staying ready. But you hope for a guy like that. He's not on the 40-man roster, but you would hope that perhaps he is on that taxi squad roster that we're hearing about, that the rosters may be expanded from, say, 25 to 30 if baseball returns, but they might also have a 20-player taxi squad, which will essentially be like their AAA team because there's no minor league baseball. If you're a part of that squad, then that should increase his chances greatly, maybe of getting a call up and get that cup of coffee with the Tigers this season if there's baseball.
Joe, just to finish off, what are you looking forward to once the pandemic's over?
Well, I think the biggest thing is getting back to our real jobs. It's Robert, what you're doing right now, too, it's different. We live in a different world, and we're probably going to live in a different world. But it would sure be nice if a day comes where Jamie and I can get back on our set, whether it's in the studio in Toronto covering Blue Jays games, or hopefully, maybe next year, I don't see it happening this year, actually getting back inside the ballpark. There's nothing like doing our job from inside the ballpark where we can talk to players and coaches and really have that feel with the fans and the stadium noise all around us. It's the best place to be.
Stay tuned. You're watching Sarnia Lambton Daily on your TV. That's going to do it for our show tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you back here tomorrow.